is unlikely to happen in the following 6 months of 2017, which means the budget speech for 2018, the 2018 budget speech, will not have a budget in it that affects the 2019 fees. The 2018 budget speech determines 2019 fees. That means that for the next 3 years still, we will have an annual crisis like this, where the government and DHET and others are scrambling around to find money to avoid an increase while the policy has been put in place. We think that it should be possible for the government to take extraordinary measures to resolve some of these issues now before the end of this year, if necessary to ask the Judicial Commission to report or to give an interim report on the key issues by the end of this year, so that the Minister of Finance in his next budget speech in March can put into the budget whatever is required so that next year this time we are not in the same situation. That would be a sign of goodwill. It would be a sign that we are taking the students' concerns about affordability seriously. I do want to emphasize that I think the Minister of Higher Education and Training has done a terrific job in ensuring that there is in effect a moratorium on fees for 2017. But what we can see is that the national student movement, and this is a crisis, we need to respond even to that. So that's at the level of fees, and that's the national level. At the local level on the university, I have been talking to students. We have tried to get students talking to each other, talking to staff, working with the SRC, working with student councils, to try to understand the more specific local issues that are getting in the way of returning to work. Most of these are issues that cannot be addressed in a matter of days. And the message I want to send out to protesting students is don't sacrifice your futures, the future of the country and the future of higher education over these short-term and specific issues. We need to address those in a parallel process, in a democratic process, in a process that is not won through force and through might and through bullying, but a process that is through negotiation and democratic. So those are my main issues. I don't want to. I want to leave it open for questions. So over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Price. We'll now open for questions. What we will do is we will take one question and then allow the VC to respond and then come back to the next question. May I now recognize hands? Anyone would like to ask questions? Okay. Yeah. And just before you go ahead, just give us your name as well as your media house, please.
Rafika Williams, Voice of the Cape. I just wanted to ask you said that there should be processes in place to sort of meet with students and management in the middle. So have these processes been put in place? Are there plans for these processes to be put in place?
We would not be starting this for the first time. We've been meeting regularly with the SRC, which is the representative structure democratically elected by the student body. The protesters that are driving this are outside of the SRC. The SRC does not support the shutdown. So that creates a slight difficulty that you start negotiating with whoever shouts loudest, and you create a culture that if you want to speak to the Vice-chancellor or you want to speak to the management of the university, then you organize an occupation or a sit-in or a disruption. So we have to work very carefully with that. But in these extraordinary situations, we must talk even with students, with those students. So I have addressed one of the issues at UCT is around 5 students who have been expelled. Only 5 students who've been expelled. And there is a call for them to be returned to the university. And I have sent messages to each of them from my team to say we're open to meeting. Some of them have accepted those messages, and we are meeting with them. Others have not yet accepted those messages. So that's one level of engagement with the people directly affected. Others, there is also a group of students who go under the label #ShackvilleTRC, and we have met with their representatives. We have asked for further meetings. So yes, the answer is, in a situation like this, you just must meet with anyone who's willing to talk and we're willing to do that. There are also tens of thousands of students who are feeling enormously frustrated that their studies are being held to ransom. And I've been having meetings, open fora, with the staff of the university. I've been going to residences to talk to those students. I've invited them to write to me directly. And in a sense, they are also represented by the SRC. So I'm negotiating with them through that. I think the challenge is to reassure those students that we are as committed to opening the university as they are, and we're doing everything possible to do that.
Okay, perhaps with just a bit of time, I'm going to recognize about 3 hands, but you don't come all at the same time, just come one after the other, and then the VC will respond just like that, so that I don't have to keep stepping back onto the podium after every question and answer. So the next 3 hands, you are the next one, the second one, the third one. Any third question? Okay, there's one right at the back there, so in that particular order. Just ask a question, let him respond, and then the next one will come in.
Hi, Lyndon Khan, SABC News. I wanted to know, you mentioned private security. Is there any indication of how much has been spent on private security over the Fees Must Fall protest?
Well, very little at the moment, because we've had no private security for most of this year. And the security we've had has been to protect a tribunal here or a meeting there. But during the period in February, when we had a threatened shutdown, and during the period last year, when we had to use private security to protect the examinations, and you need a lot of security. We've got 33 residences, examination halls. It was costing an average of R1 million a month to protect the campus with private security. But that was when we were trying to run the full operation. Most of the time this year we've had almost none, and we have almost none at the moment. Does that answer your question?
Hi, Romantha from Netwerk 24. I have 2 questions. We wrote today, I think it's in today's newspaper, we wrote about the Consumer Protection Act, and that students they can take legal action should they not be, refunded for time lost. So should this strike, or should the protest continue, is there a possibility of students being able to get refunded? In an instance where a student might have to continue next year and decide, I don't want to continue at UCT anymore, I'll go elsewhere. What are the possibilities with that? Will you look into that? That's the first question. And secondly, with prospective students applying already for next year, and with the academic year possibly being shut down, have you seen a decline in the applications, specifically because UCT is the only one in the Western Cape that is shut down?
Thank you. We haven't seen any decline in applications, but that's perhaps not surprising, because applications had to be in before this recent shutdown or unrest started. But fortunately for UCT, we'd have 5 or 10 times as many people applying as we have places, and I'm hopeful that that's not going to present a threat to filling the classes next year. The Consumer Protection Act has been discussed, and I'm getting conflicting legal opinions, so I don't have the answer. But the dominant opinion seems to be that our obligation is to deliver a service we've agreed to deliver. So if students come back next year and we can still complete what we've undertaken in a contract to complete, including exams, then they would not be entitled to a refund. But we certainly couldn't charge them more, as I indicated earlier. So that's the advice I have, but I'm still waiting for more proper legal opinion on that. I can only say that that if we think that there is an economic crisis for the universities, and if we are at risk of not being able to fund the universities, that would obviously aggravate it. So it's a point that needs to be made to protesting students and those who support a shutdown, that this could result in the medium-term collapse of the universities, which would require a long time to recover, because the first thing that will happen is that your top staff leave. Top staff have other options. They'll go overseas, they'll go into the private sector, to private universities will jump up. This is a scenario that we're seeing now that has happened in other countries across the continent, where what often happened in those other countries is government abolished fees altogether, said that they would fund the universities, and then didn't fund the universities adequately, didn't give the necessary increases. And that has resulted in some great universities in the 60s going into decline, and only in the last decade have those policies changed and those universities are recovering.
Hi, Dr. Price. I'm Ilse Friedrich from the Cape August. I just wanted to ask you in terms of foreign students. I see there have been some tweets from foreign students. I think your SRC has also raised some concerns around foreign students who are have concerns about their study visas running out and that they won't be able to finish the year before this happens. What is being done in this regard?
Thank you. We're approaching the Department of Home Affairs and asking them to help with some sort of blanket extension of students who have study visas that would expire to ensure that they can complete the academic year.
Afternoon, Carmel Roberts from the SABC. Vice-Chancellor, what indication have you been given? I mean, you've decided now that come Monday, the 3rd of October, you're going to go ahead. But what indication have you been given or any confidence from students that this protest will not start again on Monday, the 3rd of October? Are you confident going in that come Monday, the 3rd of October, things might settle down?
No, I'm not confident. I think we're still in that process of engagement. I'm trying to persuade people that there are other methods of achieving their goals, but we may not solve all the issues. And of course, as I said, this is a national issue, the call for free education. And I'm trying to say to our students, we support the basic principles here, free education for the poor, affordable education for everyone. Don't destroy your own futures in the process. So it's partly about getting that message across and doing so with a very low level of security so that we don't inflame the situation. But at this point, I don't want to suggest that there's been no indication yet from the people who are driving the protest that they would be willing to come back to work on the 3rd of October. But we're still in the process. I'm hoping that we'll get there.
I think I was last. Okay, hi. Paul Herman from News 24. Just two questions for my own clarity's sake. On Friday, staff and alumni protested outside Parliament and handed over a memorandum to the department. They accepted it publicly. I'd just like to know if there's been any commitment or any response since then. And then my second question is, you mentioned that in the worst case scenario, if the year had to be carried over to the first semester of 2017, what then happens to the entire year? Will you start then a new calendar year in the second semester of 2017? What happens to new students? So it's not just the first semester, what happens to the entire year in process and the cycle of ongoing applications, etc.?
Thank you. We have not yet received a response from the Department of Higher Education and Training, whom we handed over the memorandum at Parliament. But I'm hoping I'm hoping to engage with the Minister and the Department directly. Your question of what happens if we roll over the year to the next year, I have to say it's never been done here, so it's new territory for us. The logical thing to do would be to start the new intake as soon as we finish the old one. So if we end up finishing in March, to take the new intake in a few weeks after that in April. And then to, over a year or period, to try to make up that time through, for example, not having long holidays, having terms during the holidays, compressing the academic year in some way. It's a situation which is very unpleasant for students and even more unpleasant for staff. And so we don't almost want to contemplate it. We're not there yet. But that is probably what we would have to do.
Okay, it's Liz Fish from Carte Blanche. I just wanted to know if the VCs are pressuring government to have a crisis meeting in the light of what's happened and also the timing. I know originally, universities plan for their budgets for next year, but surely this whole crisis could have been avoided if they'd got through exams and then made this announcement. Why now? Why do this again?
I think that, if anything, we were putting pressure on them to give us an answer as early as possible. It would be unfair to say now that he should have told us. We do need to plan a year in advance, or at 6 months in advance, approve budgets. And developing a budget depends very much on how much money we would get from government in lieu of fee increases. So I would have rather had the answer in July, so that we would have more time to deal with this. I'm sorry, your first question was, I'm going to me.
Reaction from students. Is there going to be a crisis meeting with government, with all the VCs across the country?
I don't know if government has accepted that, but we've asked for one. The VCs are all meeting tomorrow in Johannesburg. We will discuss the strategies, of course, across the country. I think I'm not sure whether there will be people from the Department of Health there yet, or other ministries. But we'll certainly ask for one following that, because this is a national issue.
Good morning, Mr. eNCA. Just some clarity on the building procedure you mentioned, that 80 to 90% wanted the university to reopen. And secondly, we have a medium-term budget statement by the finance minister in a few weeks' time. You mentioned earlier that these budgeting processes takes time, up to 3 years. What are you hoping for the finance minister to say, and are you hoping for any concrete political statement from government over these protests?
Not expecting necessarily or hoping for anything in the interim budget statement. I think the government has done well to find money to keep fees at the same level for next year. What we're hoping for, and it's not in the matter of days or a month. What we're hoping for is a commitment to a final policy that can be, or a final policy framework that can be implemented that will have an impact on that, and so that would be the key issue. I don't know whether the Vice-chancellors will have to discuss tomorrow whether we think that bringing any more money into the system in an interim budget could make any difference. My reading of the current protest is that it's a call for free education, and it's a call for free education now, and it's a free education for everyone. I think that would be a regressive anti-poor policy. It would mean that there would be less funding in education, in higher education for the poor. And so I do not support that call. But I do support the call for affordability. And so if a system can be in place that says, show us that you can't afford the fees that exist and we will help you out, that would be the solution. And that may require some more money than exists. But let me say that we don't have a view yet on that. UCT chose, up to now, at any rate, not to have a poll because, A, we know that the vast majority of students want to come back to work, and secondly, we don't think that this is about a democratic decision. It's we are committed, the university is committed to opening classes. The question is about what measures of security are required and whether we can effectively keep the campus open with those measures of security. And how can we win as many people over to our side to believe and understand that the university must be kept open, and if necessary, people to understand that the security is there because the alternative is so serious and too serious to contemplate. That's our job. But the polls that have been conducted often by individual academics in the faculties, and many of the faculties have now conducted polls amongst their students saying, and that's what I was reporting, to say that in most cases over 80%, of the ones I've seen, the students want to be in class.
So, hi, Mike Cohen from Bloomberg News. You mentioned that the first thing that happens is your top academics leave when you face the budget cuts. But can you give us some indication of what's happened to the university as it kind of tries to scale back on expenses in response to lower than anticipated revenues? Where have you been cutting, and where do you cut from here?
Thank you. We've been implementing an austerity program, and will continue to do so. Some areas are areas of just greater efficiency, and they're the relatively mundane issues: travel, moving to more paperless environment, working smarter. Some areas have been through early retirements and voluntary separations. People who were probably planning to leave are not as productive as they might otherwise have been, or that as they would have been at their prime, and who are scaling down. And so we've only accepted those voluntary separations from people who we think, where we in a sense where we think that that's in the interest of the university, in the strategic interest. Someone who is an A-rated scientist and productive, we haven't accepted a voluntary separation. And then we're having to look at some areas where it would be nice for the university to continue offering services, but where economically it just doesn't make sense. There are occasionally courses that have very few students, and that to have a lecturer or a department or an area of specialization that offers courses for very few students can't be justified, because what could be justified if you had enough money, but in this sort of environment can't be justified. And so those are the main areas. At the moment, I feel confident in saying that we are not compromising the academic project in doing this. One of the fortunate areas for a university like UCT is that all of our research money is generated from outside the university and from outside the country. If you look at our budget, nearly half of all the money we spend, half of our budget is money that is spent on research and generated from outside the university. And that will continue, and so that I think our research profile and our research strength can continue in spite of this. There are clearly knock-on effects, because some of the people doing research are also teaching, and if they have to teach larger classes, they have less time for research. But I think that we are, at this point, confident that we're not compromising the academic project. But that's what we're holding on to. That scenarios that play out as I described earlier, I think that would be threatened.
Thanks. Last question from News 24. 5 students who were expelled that you're meeting with. This is also a negotiation to perhaps see if they can be reinstated at the university. I'd just like to know, to what extent is the ball in their court? Is it still the university's final decision? And if you could possibly just remind us why they were expelled, like what are the grounds compared to other students who were also protesting? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just say, in case it gets misunderstood, we haven't got agreement to meet all 5. Some of them haven't replied. We've invited them. The offences for which they have been found guilty and expelled range from assault of students and staff, invading offices and removing people from their offices in hostile ways, which is another form of assault, invading residences and intimidating the catering workers there and taking food that they're not entitled to, burning university property, including a bus and paintings and other artifacts, and disrupting the core business of the university in ways that is illegal and is in contravention of the code of behavior for students. So these are serious offences, and I should say that I wouldn't be surprised if if some of these students were being tried in court, that these would lead to jail sentences. It's that order of offence. Now, firstly, I should say that all of them are indicating that they will appeal or have appealed. And that creates an unfortunate, it's a delay. It means we can't really proceed until those appeals are are addressed. And it also creates an issue of confidentiality that we can't talk openly, both about individuals and about the offences, because let's just say someone on appeal was found not to be guilty. We don't want their reputation to have been defamed by the provisional finding. So there are some constraints on this. But what are we meeting them about? What we're saying is that we are not interested in destroying their careers. Some of these students have done 5 years of study, and with 1 more year they could graduate. But an expulsion means that they can't. We're not interested in making this a life sentence. If they were to participate in some sort of restorative justice process, some sort of reconciliation process, where they acknowledge what's been done, and they also acknowledge the rights of that this is unacceptable behavior, and that they would not do these things again, and that they would behave within a code of conduct, then we would be open to considering a restorative justice process that makes it possible at some stage in the future for them to come back and continue their careers. I should say that that process is necessary. I mean, you might say, why don't I just issue a statement and say, if you sign this agreement, you can come back. That process is necessary because on the Facebook pages of some of these students and in their public statements, they have said that they support violence. They've said that they support the burning of the library at KwaZulu-Natal when that was burnt down, and they indicated solidarity with those students. They've said that some of them have said that they believe that they are subjected to violence as students at UCT, and that this justifies their violence in reaction. Now, if that's going to be the continued approach, then I don't see a way of having those students come back to campus and completing their careers. So that's why it's not something that I can just do or would just do. It needs to go through a process, a restorative justice process, and essentially that's what we're offering.
Good afternoon. Shamila Fisher from Eyewitness News. Vice-Chancellor, we've received a call from a UCT staff member who says she and other colleagues are growing increasingly concerned for their safety, as well as emotional stability following the protest and shutdown. Have you engaged with staff members about the plan to reopen on the 3rd of October and the potential for more violence?
First, I want to express my empathy and sympathy with our staff and students. They have been facing intimidation. Some of them have been in awful situations in a car at a barricade where people thump on the car or jump on the car. Our bus drivers have had the keys grabbed out of their hands and removed and been told they may not drive the buses. So some of the behavior of the protesters who are trying to shut down the university, in my view, goes beyond anything that's legal. And where we've identified those students, we will charge them if we think that the offences are criminal. And I've encouraged staff, if they can identify students who are intimidating them, to report that to our investigations office, and we will follow that up. It's completely unacceptable. But it happens, and the message to staff is if you're feeling unsafe, if you're feeling scared, you should not come to work. Do not put yourself at risk. We're not asking staff to do that. We're asking staff where in many parts of the university activities are continuing normally, not classes, but administrative activities. And we're saying to staff, if you can continue functioning in consultation with your line manager, please do. But if you can't, and we understand that, your safety comes first. This week, we are not really doing much to protect staff. We are rather, we've made a commitment to a very low level of security, to using the time for engagement, to using the time for finding other solutions, because we worry that bringing more security onto campus actually escalates things and makes that engagement harder. But if we cannot get through it this week, then next week we will have to do that. And then we will be protecting staff with the necessary security.
Lester from eNCA again. It has become clear that there is no uniform umbrella body guiding the student movement. How many groups, individuals, interests are you currently negotiating with, especially since some of these groups have delegitimized the SRC? And secondly, you spoke earlier about expulsions and suspensions. Has there been any students in this current season that we've experienced that the university has probably identified that it will be laying some sort of charges or complaints against?
There are students in the current range of protests, particularly those who behaved in acts of intimidation or assault, that our investigators are building the cases against them, and we will bring disciplinary charges against them. So yes, we are. Your first question really puts a finger on what is turning out to be the most difficult issue for us in engagement, which is that you have different political movements like SASCO, PASMA, the Pan-African Students Movement of Tanzania, DASO. You have SRCs that are elected and some which are not elected. You have group political parties like EFF, ANC Youth League on the campuses, PYA, the Progressive Youth Alliance. Then you also have groups that have special interests or special identities, such as the Transgender Collective or the Rape Survivors Collective, who have or the mental health group, who have very real issues. And sometimes those struggles are being hijacked by the groups because in order to build numbers. But, you know, some of these protests started at Rhodes University earlier in the year, where the key focus was the rape culture. And that is not a Rhodes problem. It's in every university. It's at UCT as well. And we have tried, and we are responding to that, we think, constructively. But sometimes those groups will align themselves with some of these protests in order to strengthen their own causes. So there are multiple groups, and it shifts, and it makes it very difficult to negotiate. In the end, you're speaking out into the cyberspace and getting responses from that. Thank you all very much for coming. I hope it's a good use of your time.